This is a bit of an overview of the western 2/3-ish of the boundary waters. So the green is the BWCAW. Ely is located at the bottom, just to the upper right of our logo there at the bottom. So the boundary waters is about 1 million acres with about 1,000 lakes and 2,000 remote campsites. And when people start thinking about the boundary waters, oftentimes they don't know where to start because it's so big and there are so many options. And working with outfitters and working with Paddle Planner are a couple of ways to start narrowing down your options. One of the really unique things about the BWCA is how accessible it is. A lot of wilderness areas are the kind of place where you need to backpack in, carry everything on your back the whole way, and you have to go kind of long, arduous distances. Because the BWCA is sort of long and narrow, it goes about 150 miles east to west along the border, and it's relatively narrow. You can access it at any of about 70 different entry points. And if you look kind of closely at your screen, I wanted to include this slide because there are red circles with numbers in them, and those show the number of certain entry points. So they're just scattered around the perimeter. And all the permits for the boundary waters are allotted by specific entry point and by specific entry day. You've got to start at the entry point and on the day of your permit. So this just gives you kind of a little bit of a visual on how those entry points are scattered around the wilderness. So outfitters are a little unique in that they're really part of the boundary waters wilderness experience for a lot of people. A lot of regulars can't imagine going into the wilderness without using an outfitter, which is different than a lot of other recreation areas. Like going to a state park, you don't usually contact somebody with kind of the depth of experience to help you plan your trip. You just kind of get online and look around and you're like, oh yeah, we're going to go there and we're going to camp. But the wilderness is sort of different, and there are a lot, it's a little bit more complicated to pull together that trip. And that's why outfitters, like on the next slide, you'll see Ely Outfitting Company in downtown Ely. That's our shop. But outfitters are going to help you with trip planning and routing and help you pull together the permitting and kind of all the details. So there are several dozen outfitters scattered around the perimeter of the boundary waters, and you're really lucky. People are really lucky because the outfitters are really high quality, and we've got a lot of high quality outfitters who can help you. So that's pretty awesome. So outfitters are going to help you with a bunch of information, and we've tried to put a lot of our information on our website at elyoutfittingcompany.com, just so you can kind of explore and get some tailored info. But routing, which Ben is going to talk to you a lot about with his awesome resource, Paddle Planner, is a really important part of figuring out what you're going to do, because some entry points to the BWCA may start with, say, a 2-mile portage, which may not be what you're looking for. And some routes are going to start right at, say, a sand beach. You're going to start paddling from there. So you can have a really arduous trip, or you can have one that's a lot easier. The way we work with people on trip planning is all through an online process. You'll see we've got a trip routing form. And at the top of every page on our website, there's a link to it. And this is the page you get to. But basically, it's a mobile-friendly online form that you can click through your general interest for the trip. You don't even have to have been to the boundary waters before, and submit that. And actually, our outfitters will actually look over your interests and email you back some route options. So what we're doing is narrowing down sort of infinite options to 3 or 4 options that may fit perfectly with your interests. And those options are kind of neat because they include an interactive map with the route shown on it in green, and that's on Paddle Planner, Ben's awesome resource there. And then we've also kind of detailed distance information and portage information and highlights and considerations. So you've got an email with all this great data to kind of compare and contrast some routes that fit with your general interests, and you can share them with your friends and say, hey, I like this route. What do you think? And ask questions and go from there. So that's kind of the online way we found to get you the best information to make the best decisions about your route. And so outfitters, people usually think of not just information, but they also think of renting things like outfitting. Another thing that's really unique about the BWCA is a lot of people decide to do complete outfitting packages. So when people do a complete outfitting package, it means they're going to get their canoes and canoeing equipment, their camping equipment like their tents and their sleeping bags and their pots and pans. They're also going to get their trail menu that they kind of click through. So basically, when you do a complete outfitting package, you can show up with the things that you wear, optional fishing equipment, and then we provide basically all the rest. It's also really unique in the outdoors experience. There aren't many other places where that is really sort of customary for a self-guided trip. However, sometimes you've got a lot of the gear and you don't need all of this. This just lists kind of a bulleted list of kind of everything that's included in there, right down to your toilet paper and hand sanitizer, and matches and lighter and bear rope systems. So it makes getting into the wilderness really sort of convenient and easy, and takes out some of the uncertainty of trip planning when you do complete outfitting with an outfitter, and lets you focus on the other fun stuff. But if you don't need all this, you might at one end of the spectrum need to just rent a canoe. At the other end, or somewhere in the middle, you might do a partial outfitting package, which is a lot of outfitters will have like a food package where you can just get the food for your trip and maybe a canoe, or a partial outfitting package with part of the gear and no food in the canoe. So you've got options there for self-guided trips, but you can also do a professionally guided trip, and you can skip to the next slide. That is me on Four Town Lake. And so the guided trip experience is really something special. And for a first-time experience, you will learn a ton from your guide. You'll see things you'd otherwise miss, and you'd probably catch more fish. And a guide just helps with that day-to-day decision-making on trail and navigating that helps your first trip go more smoothly. So while a guided trip is really amazing, also guided trips only account for about 5% of the trips in the wilderness. So most people are going self-guided. So you'll save money for sure on a self-guided experience, but it's definitely worth considering professionally guided. A couple other things people see outfitters for are transportation services, getting a shuttle to your entry point and your exit point if you're starting and ending at different places. You also might get a bunk house. On the next photo on the slides, a bunk house is typically just a very simple motel unit. Ours have private entry, private bath, and basically bunked beds like this. It's really nice to do a bunk house before your trip, because for your first day on trail, it's just a really great idea to get on the water earlier rather than later. And if you show up the day before, get all your outfitting taken care of, go over your route with your maps and your outfitter. And if you're doing a car top, get your canoe tied down, sleep in the bunkhouse, walk to a restaurant for dinner, get a start early in the morning. The reason it's important to start early in the day is because all the campsites are first come, first served. And everything is going to go more smoothly if you get a good campsite earlier in the day rather than later in the day. Your outfitter is also going to help you with some skills like portaging skills, how to get that canoe on your shoulders, as well as some navigation skills, and just answer all your questions. So that's a little bit about outfitters and how they can help you have a good Boundary Waters experience. I'll talk about some planning tips, a little bit about safety, and just some quick fails in addition here. So let's see, planning tips. Keep in mind that BWCA permits are all first come, first served. So the time to start reserving your permit is in January when they first become available. They're all available now. The Forest Service reduced permits by 13% going into the wilderness for this season. And it's really important for best permit availability that you start planning and looking at permit availability today for this summer if you haven't already. And that's really actually imperative. We've never seen as limited permit availability for the BWCA as we have, or as we're seeing now. When to go? We get that question all the time. And the next image shows average weather. We don't really have a wet season, but June is going to be a little bit wetter than the other months. You'll see average highs and average lows, but usually people are coming in June, July, and August. Shoulder seasons are May and September. People don't come in October. Don't plan on your first trip to the Boundary Waters in October. It can be very cold and very snowy at times. Remember, these are only averages, and the only weather guarantee that you'll hear your outfitter make is that there will be weather, and it could be cold. So every month of the summer, I'm taking long underwear, synthetic long underwear tops and bottoms, and a warm hat. So expect it to be colder than the average low. Next up, bugs. People ask about bug season because I think a lot about it. That's a couple of mosquitoes on my knuckle. And so peak bug season is usually mid-June through July, and they start tapering off in August. The main thing to keep in mind is that mosquitoes are going to be the most significant right at dusk as the sun dips behind the tree tops. So you'll want to have your dinner done, dessert done, dishes done, and be ready to head for your tents typically right at dusk. And they'll just last for about an hour. And then you can come back out and sit around the campfire. But usually when people are traumatized by the bugs, it's because they try to fight them off at dusk. General rule also for dealing with bugs is wear long synthetic pants like nylon pants, wear long synthetic shirts like nylon shirts, and then use DEET on the backs of your hands and on your hat. The DEET is going to repel the mosquitoes and also ticks. And the American Society of Pediatrics says use DEET on your kids as well. You want 25 to 30% DEET, and you don't want 100% DEET because that stuff's really caustic. It'll take the paint off your watch and your glasses, and it's complete nastiness. So 25 to 30% DEET, and you'll be good to go. Other planning tips people oftentimes ask us about fishing. General rule, early summer is one of the best times for fishing. The walleye are near the current, and the smallmouth bass are shallow, and the northern pike tend to be shallow in the early season. So May and June can be some of the best fishing, but remember, you got world-class fishing opportunities all summer long, and your outfitter will point you in the right direction. A couple other planning tips. The next photo. Don't forget reliably waterproof rain gear tops and bottoms. This is another family I guided, and they didn't believe me about reliably waterproof rain gear tops and bottoms, and they called me halfway to Ely on their way, and they said, "Do we really need the rain gear tops and bottoms?" I said, "Yes, absolutely." So they stopped at, I think, Walmart in Duluth and picked them up, and they were very, very happy they did. Remember, storm systems will veer hundreds of miles off course just to rain on paddlers who don't bring rain gear. So please bring it. In order to be comfortable and warm, you have to be dry. Also, top level trick, avoid cotton, no blue jeans and no cotton sweatshirts, because they're hydrophilic, they get wet and you can't get them dry on trail. Next up is a photo of some boots. Probably one of the most controversial topics in Boundary Waters travel is footwear. I tend to wear these. They are knee-high rubber boots, but as you're getting out in and out of the canoe, you're always stepping in the water because there aren't docks, right? And your feet will stay more dry as long as you don't go to the top of these rubber boots. What's most typical, however, is not what I'm wearing here. It's just old sneakers, So wet shoes for traveling during the day, and then a separate set of dry shoes that you keep in your pack for around camp at night. Keep in mind, don't wear flip-flops, please. Too many ankle injuries, and you want closed-toe footwear for safety as well. And final planning tip here for you is get on the water early. Like I mentioned, get to camp early. Do your traveling in the morning, get to camp early in the afternoon, ideally, and you'll have best campsite availability since they're first come, first served. A little bit about safety. Boundary Waters is one of the safest trips you can do with your friends and family, but you are further from help, so be aware of that. Something that is not the most dangerous thing in the wilderness is on the next slide. Even though people think of it, the bears are not typically a problem. Keep a clean camp, and they're a little bit like oversized dogs. They don't eat people. These are just black bears. They are not grizzly bears. If you have them in camp, you just shoo them away by making loud noises and yelling at them, maybe throwing a rock at them. It's not going to hurt them. You also want to keep a clean camp. And on the next slide, you'll see some best practices. Don't keep food in your tent and store everything out of the bear's reach. And these are some of the distances for clearance that you want to keep your food out of reach of the bears. And we rent these bear pulley systems, and they're included in our packages. And this is one of the ways you can keep your food secure, that or certain bear-proof barrels sometimes people use as well. Other safety issues, good news, we have no venomous snakes or spiders. We do, however, have lightning. If there's lightning, get off the water, stay away from the tallest tree in the area, don't stand in water. Speaking of water, on the next slide, we love to swim. And one of the most relaxing things you can do is put on your life jacket and go swimming. And this is actually probably one of the hallmarks of my life, is just telling people to wear their life jacket whenever you're in a canoe and whenever you're swimming in the wilderness. When you most need it is maybe when you least expect it. And I also find that the most experienced Boundary Waters travelers are the ones who are wearing their life jacket the most. I can't reinforce that enough. Wear your life jacket when you're out there. You also want to wear your shoes when you're swimming because of things like sharp rocks and lost fish hooks. The most frequent injury in the wilderness is slip and falls. So watch your footing, and keep in mind that there's not reliable cell service over most of the wilderness. So don't expect a quick call to get you out of there. Finally, some fails, and I just have a couple here, because I don't want you to make these mistakes. As a general rule, the people I've seen who are in the greatest amount of distress in the wilderness are either 1, severely sunburned, ouch, or 2, trying to portage kayaks. So kayaks just are not good for traveling in the wilderness as a general rule because they don't portage well. So canoes are what almost everybody uses and everybody in the know uses. Also, hammock campers, it's becoming popular, but you need to make sure if you use a hammock, that it's bug proof and weatherproof and warm enough. We're seeing some pretty significant fails on that. And finally, the last thing is on the fails, just be sure to do your traveling in the morning and get to camp in the very early afternoon for best campsite availability. And thanks so much. Have an amazing Boundary Waters trip. It's my favorite place in the world, and I hope it will be yours too.